My name is Ted. I'm the founder and executive director of the Reach Alliance, and we are the ministry responsible for projects like the Extreme Tour and the Objective and a thing called Stitches Cultural Project, which none of you have probably ever heard of. But that's who I am, and I want to welcome you to this afternoon session, which we have given a title, an updated title. It might be different than the title you're looking for, so listen carefully in case you're in the wrong place. We're going to talk this afternoon on the topic, now more than ever, opportunities to use your art to demonstrate and declare God's love behind enemy lines and in crazy times. So hopefully that is what you're looking for, because that's where you are. So virtually, we're all together. And if you got your Bibles with you, I'd love for us to just start right off with some scripture that informs a lot of the life that I have been happy to be a part of, and a lot of what we're going to discuss. And so the passage we're looking at is 1 Corinthians 1, starting with verse 26, and it says this: "Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." Lord, well, weakness is something I can definitely relate to, especially right now. I want to just declare, Lord, I know that I am not enough, and that the words that we're looking for and what we want to learn this afternoon cannot be from me. It's not enough. Lord, I just pray that you would come and you would move despite my weakness, despite our weakness, and you would speak to us in a way that fills us with your spirit and your power and your strength, Lord, so that we could follow you in alignment with everything you have called us to and everything you have for us to be a part of as you work. So, Lord, I just pray that right now you would take over this time. And Lord, you would set aside anything in us that would stand in the way of you moving and speaking and shaping us as we come together in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, I know that there are a few of you that at least were registered for this bad boy that I know personally. So you already know about me and about what we do, but there's a bunch of you that I've never met. And so I just want to tell you right off the bat that I am really honored to have the opportunity to speak to you like this. I consider it a real privilege to have this opportunity. To me, people like you, artists, are a pretty big deal. And you've probably heard Byron, I know, and many other speakers throughout the course of this virtual gathering already drive home the point that artists are pretty special. They're people like you, gifted with this uncanny ability, as Byron likes to put it, to communicate directly to the heart of those who will experience your expression. You're gonna unlock things with this thing that God has given you, with this expression that has been planted in you. You're more than the average everyday person. You're messengers, you're visionaries, you're dreamers, right? And you know that. You can feel it. You've been filled with a fire that you can't even ignore, a relentless passion that overflows, an urgency to express, right? You've heard all this. You know all this. You have this unrelenting need, no doubt, as messengers to deliver a message that must be heard. And if you're a part of ACT, I just assume it sort of goes with the demographic that you already sense that you're people called to say something that cannot, that must not stay silent, right? You feel this unshakable calling, don't you? I assume that, knowing that you're a part of ACT, knowing the other members that I've met in the past, and knowing that you feel this unshakable calling, I suggest to you, probably like many who've come before me, during this gathering that answering that calling has never been more important than it is right now. I mean, let's go with the hashtag. It's 2020, for better or worse, and most would say for worse. I don't imagine I have to offer like reams of statistics or stories to convince you that we live in desperate times, surrounded by a world of desperate people. The need is undeniable. I was reminded as I was preparing last night to share with you guys today, you know, of that passage of scripture. It says the world groans for a savior. It groans for Christ's return. And I feel like you can feel the groaning right now more than ever. Surely you feel this, I hope. I know we do. I know that I come here imagining that I'm meeting with a group of artists longing to take that next step, to run to the need that surrounds us and to carry the message they were given so that they step into the calling they were made for. And right now, my prayer is that the time that we spend is spent pursuing that together, online and on mission. And I want to share with you as best I can from about 30 years of experience in music and media and outreach to the counterculture around the world. The things that I can glean from that experience that have shaped the way that I believe we need to go after that calling, so that we can take this hope to the people who need it. And I think the first thing that I would say to you is, especially if you're just getting started, any response to this calling you feel needs to be considered. And I think the first thing we consider comes right from the passage we just read. At least for me, the consideration that I can't help but avoid when I feel called is that sense right away that who do I think I am? What in the world qualifies me? I wonder what it is you think qualifies you. And if you're like me, trying to answer any question somebody might give as to what qualifies me to carry a message so important, that's not a question I really wanted to answer back in the day. I mean, I knew I wasn't qualified. If I didn't know, plenty of people around me let me know, if you know what I'm saying. I just want to tell you right off the bat, Byron didn't ask me to share with you this afternoon because I've got some sort of flashy credentials. I mean, I grew up and have lived most of my life knowing I wasn't the kid you'd pick. At least that's what was imprinted on me in high school, right? I came from a broken home, very dysfunctional. Whether my peers felt it, I certainly did. I felt like I did not fit in. I felt like because of the brokenness of the home, that I was not like everyone else. And you know, you do what you do when you feel like that. When you know that you're not qualified, you tend to isolate and stay away, at least before you understand your calling. I didn't have any clue of a calling. I just felt worthless. And so I sat alone in the lunchroom. I buried myself in music. I closed my eyes and shut the world out and waited for everything to go away and waited for life to be over. And I'm giving you the nutshell of it, but everything changed for me in a really unexpected way. It wasn't some sort of dynamic message that I heard at a youth group service or up at camp, even though mom made me go. You know, for all the Christian music I was pumping into my ears and for all of the foundation it was laying for revelation I would have later. The truth is, my revelation came very forcefully. I fell off a cliff. I was on a beach trip with my church, and you know, I didn't want to hang with the kids playing volleyball because I wasn't athletically skilled. Let's just say it like that. And so I'm hanging around up at the top of a cliff, writing poetry, you know, because I'm artistic. I'm emo, you know, and I was walking around and I came to an edge and I slipped on some loose dirt and I fell 72 feet, 7 stories, landed on my head right here, got a dent on some rocks that break ships. You know what I'm talking about? Like on the Oregon coast, landed on some rocks, split my head open. You know, well, you can imagine, should have died. They life flighted me to the local hospital. The local hospital said, we don't have what Ted needs. Ted needs more care than we're qualified to give. And so I ended up at another hospital a couple hours away. And, you know, my parents raced to get to this hospital. My dad driving from another state where he lived nearby, and when they got there, the doctors told them, "Hey, Ted's probably not going to make it. I'm really sorry. You really need to. I mean, there's really nothing we can do. His brain is swelling, which apparently is a bad thing. You'd think bigger was better, but not so much." And they said, they go, you really need to make peace with this, because this is probably, come say your goodbyes, that kind of a thing. And, I mean, obviously I'm talking to you right now, so that what the doctors predicted wasn't the destiny that God had planned. And whatever I thought was in my future, he had different intentions. And so miraculously, without any medical intervention, over the course of about a week in intensive care, they watched, they waited, and the unexpected happened, in that my brain stopped swelling. It went back down, and I don't remember any of this. So like when I have more time, I give a lot of detail and I tell the funny things that people have told me about that. But honestly, it's an easy story for me to tell, because I was like, my memories go like this. I'm on a beach trip. I'm feeling sorry for myself. I have no sense of life or calling. All of a sudden, I'm at home. Everybody's freaking out. Mom's talking about buying me a helmet for my senior year, which is not going to help things, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, like, it's not going to make my life any better. It's certainly not socially. And I guess the only real challenge for me, I don't remember the fall. I mean, it probably was scary, but I don't remember it. The challenge for me isn't the fall. The challenge for me is the doctors, honestly, because like I am trying to live whatever normal life I can. I'm in my senior year in high school. Socially, things have not been great, and I'm kind of concerned that I mean, they're talking about, like, they're worried about me. You know what I'm saying? You had a head trauma like that. They get concerned that they don't know exactly what is still to come. Your brain's a funny thing. And they're talking about putting me on the short bus and in special ed and everything. And that's like the last thing I want or need. And it feels like a confirmation of all those things. I mean, definitely not a noble birth, right? like if I wasn't qualified before, now I am especially not qualified because of whatever's happened. And so I am resisting the appointments. I'm resisting the evaluations, all the stuff that they're doing to try to, because I just want them to leave me alone and be normal. And finally, they put me in front of a psychologist or I don't know, some sort of head doctor, right? I mean, not in the physical sense, but in the mental sense, because they're concerned about whether or not Ted is really coping with this okay. And they asked me a bunch of questions about how I felt, and how I felt about my future and what hope I had, and what whether I was dealing with the trauma. And I guess I was being pretty flippant, and the doctor got kind of upset. And he said, he goes, Ted, you're not taking this very serious. I mean, you fell 72 feet off a cliff. You've had this thing happen. I mean, you seem to be really casual about it. And I said, well, doc, I mean, some people fall off cliffs and die, I guess, and some people fall. I mean, I'm sitting here. And he goes, aren't you some sort of like holy man, was the word he used, which I grew up in Oregon, and I don't know what the culture's like where you live. I'm in Nashville now, and the culture's very different here. But in Oregon, in those days, certainly, it was very what they would call post-Christian. So, like, usually when somebody asks you if you're religious or uses a phrase like holy man, it's not going to be some compliment or ringing endorsement of the faith that you claim. And so I didn't know how that was relevant. You're my doctor. You're here to talk to me about my head. Why does my personal faith have anything to do with this in my mind? And I said, I go, well, I mean, I don't know if I call it. He goes, aren't you like religious? You're like a Christian or something, right? And I go, well, I mean, yeah. And he said, well, I got to tell you something, Ted. He goes, I'm not. I'm an atheist. I'm thinking, cool, doc, thanks. This is not exactly the pep talk I was hoping for. And he says, Ted, like I don't believe in God. Like you're a Christian, you believe in God, you say you believe in God. And so I guess you can explain this. He goes, but I'm a doctor. I'm a man of science. He goes, and I'm on a team of doctors. It's our job to medically, scientifically explain what happened to you, what it did to your body, and, the damage and how you're going to recover. And he goes, I'm looking at what happened to you. And he goes, I got news for you. People don't fall 72 feet off a cliff, and that's not a normal thing and live. He goes, they normally don't make it here for us to have this conversation. And he said, my job is to explain why you're different. And he said, me, my team, we don't have any explanation. We don't believe in God. We can't chalk it up to that, but we have to rethink everything. He goes, we're taking it serious. You should. That really got my attention in a way that I think most of us can understand. If you've had an encounter or experience with the Lord like that, I mean, I knew immediately sitting right there in that chair, I knew why I was sitting there. I knew what was different, I guess. I knew what had saved me. I knew instantly because of the foundation laid, because of whatever I'd thought or believed before. In an instant, I knew I'm sitting there. God saved me. I knew if he saved me, he must have a reason. There's a plan and a purpose for my life. And I made a decision based on that right there, right then, regardless of where I came from, regardless of what I was, regardless of how unqualified, whether it was my home or my birth or the decisions I'd made, or like regardless of all of that, God, the maker of heaven and earth, he believes in something that he has planned for me. And I want that. I hope you can relate. Like when you come to this awareness that God has a plan and a purpose for your life, like when it really hits you like that, like when it's not just because, your grandma said it or your pastor said it or, some lesson you read in a devotional said it, but like when like you see God intervene in your life and you go, this God has a plan and a purpose for me. How could you respond with anything but, I want that. God, if you want my life that bad, you can have it. And that's what I said. I remember those words right in my brain, man. 16 years old, sitting in the doctor's office. Remember, God, if you want my life that bad, you can have it. And the problem is, I was raised in the church and I had given my life to God. I don't even know how many times. I mean, just the times I could remember were countless, right? Like when the message was moving at youth group, when I'd go to camp and the kids left me out and I felt like nobody cared, but something the speaker said or some moment in the worship made me feel like maybe God. Like maybe God is here because I can feel him, right? And maybe he sees me because it seems like he does, right? And maybe he cares because they're singing that he does, right? And I would go forward, at least in that moment, like reaching desperately, like, God, would you please? So like this was different though. Like this had to be different because this wasn't like some emotional moment based on the swell of a bass note. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this was like divine intervention in my life. It demands a response. Giving God my life has to be more than going forward in a moment of emotion. It has to be more than attending church on Sundays. It has to be more than theming my life. I didn't have social media back then, but we had the t-shirts, right? We could let people around us know where we stood. Instead of posting on Facebook, we posted on our t-shirts. And we used the branding and the memes and the identity that the world understood before memes. So we would like take, like the Budweiser logo, but we'd just kind of tilt it a little. And then we'd say that, like Bloodweiser, this blood's for you, and things like that. So we had ways of letting people know we were Christians. I did all that. I mean, whether I wanted to or not, grandma bought me those t-shirts, even if I did, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I did that, but like, it has to be more than that. Like when you have an encounter like that, I'm like, God, if you want my life that bad, you can have it. Now I've got to figure out, what does it mean to give God your life? To really give God your life. I don't know if you're picking up on the theme. I was going to say this later. I'm going to share some of my story, but I want you, as I share my story, there's got to be parallels for you, right? Because God's no respecter of persons. He's not like, ooh, Ted Bruun. I got to believe that you have these moments too. You didn't fall off a cliff, but you came to that place of real decision where you said, this has got to be more than Sunday attendance. It's got to be more than just thematic, trappings in my life or in your music. This has got to be a real decision to give God everything. You remember what it was like to try to figure out what it meant to give God your life, to give him everything? Like, what does that mean? Like he went all the way for me. I got to go all the way for him. And so like when I tried to figure that out, like, look, maybe I was just in high school. Maybe these ideas and thoughts seem simplistic to you, but for me, they were profound, right? So like when I read, I no longer live, Christ lives through me. At a time that I was trying to figure out how to give God my life, that verse made sense. Oh, okay. I no longer live. That sounds like giving God my life. He lives through me. All right, cool. Well, what does that mean? What does it what does it mean to let Christ live through me? How does that work? Well, again, I'm in high school, right? So the big fashion accessory when I was in high school. Remember this, guys? Those of you who do, you're dating yourselves, right? Remember the WWJD bracelet fad? I mean, I know they're still around, but remember when they were like a big thing for some reason, like back in like the 90s ish? Well, at least that's when I discovered them, late 80s. So like all the WWJD bracelets, what would Jesus do? That makes sense to me. I'm going to live as if Jesus is living in me, and I'm going to try to approach everything in my life and imagine that it's Jesus in me approaching those things and those decisions, those judgment calls, what I do with every action, every expression. I'm going to do it as if it was Jesus doing it. Well, okay, that makes sense. But again, then you got to ask the question, well, how do you do that in your everyday? I mean, like, I think we all know that if we ran into somebody who like really needed to, hear an encouraging word, I hope that we would know. I hope that our sense would come up and we'd go, Jesus would love on this person. Right? Some of those things are obvious. But what does Jesus do with the everyday decisions? Like I was in a unique time in my life because I'm graduating high school and I'm planning for what I'm going to do with this gift of life I've been given. Like, what am I going to do with for a career? What am I going to what am I going to pursue? Who am I going to marry? Where am I going to live? What is life going to be about? So that's where I was at, and asking those questions. I tried to figure out what would Jesus pour his life into? Well, what did he give his life for? Or should I say who? And, as I considered the way that God had moved and acted in my life, it made sense to me that Jesus seemed to always be about the broken, the left out, the forgotten, the folks that thought they were worthless, that thought they weren't loved. Like he always was running after those who were cast off to the side. He said, I came for the sick, right? You always found him with like thieves and tax collectors, violent and sword wielding rednecks, right? Prostitutes. I mean, like he was not hanging out with the kinds of people you would think a holy man would hang out with. But I saw in that example, and I saw in the example of how he moved in my life, that God's heart is moved for his children. And if he lives in me, my heart should be moved for them too. And so I'm spending my senior year in high school trying to figure out how to love those who think that nobody cares about them, because that's what Jesus did for me. And I wanted to make my life be about that. And I thought, well, who in the world? I mean, if he rescued me, cool, we'll be working from the bottom up. So who's the next worst off person? And that's when I realized, like looking around, like God did something. He opened my eyes when I started looking for broken people. All of a sudden, people came into focus that I had overlooked. It turned out I had life pretty good, to be quite honest with you. I thought things were bad, but at least I had a dad who was around on holidays. You know what I'm saying? At least I had parents who, broken as they were, had raised me to understand who Jesus was. Thank God my mom worked 2 jobs and kept me in private school. So there was a foundation laid for me to have had all those doctor's office epiphanies that could click like that, right? Like I had it really good because it turned out I was surrounded by people like sleeping in garages and alleyways, but showing up for high school, not going home because, home is dangerous. Dad sneaks in the room at night. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the kids that I found out were all around me. They're the ones who were sitting. I thought I was alone. There were people more alone than I was. And like when God opened my eyes to them, I wanted to make my life about reaching them, loving on them, trying to follow him into a life that is not my own, but is him living through me. And that's how I ran into Lisa. So Lisa was in a place I'd never been before. She was on the cruise, and I'm not talking about like Norwegian or Royal Caribbean or all those ships that are banned right now. I'm talking about like, well, most of you would probably remember, or at least you've seen movies. Like back in the day, like the thing to do was, like on Friday and Saturday night, you're going to go look for someone to, hook up with, or someone to get you, high or whatever. And so you go and you get in a car and you drive down the boulevard, the main drag of town, and parked on the side of the street, up and down the street are all these kids looking for something to fill the emptiness. Honestly, they wouldn't say it to you like that, but that's what it was. At least that's what it was when I stumbled upon Lisa in Idaho. Lisa, I didn't know it, but Lisa was drunk out of her mind. I didn't recognize all the warning signs. I'm just trying to meet people so that I can tell them Jesus loves them, trying to follow all the training that I was given. Right. And so I had like my, the four laws and the Roman road and evangelism explosion training. If anybody knows any of these, probably going, think way of the master. All of this is dated. You probably don't know about any of it, but like all the things you're taught, like when you're trying to share the love of God with people. So I walk up to Lisa, I'm ready to have a conversation with her. I go, hey, my name's Ted, right? Do this thing. I'm not kidding. This girl turns. I mean, we've never met before. She's not paying any attention to me. She didn't ask to be approached. Sees me come walking up and, bottle in one hand, reaches with her hand into the waistband of her pants and pulls out a gun. I'm not kidding. Points this gun right at me. My first experience with anything like that. Not counting laser tag. You know what I'm saying? Points this gun right at me. And I'm like, Crossing the Switchblade. Any of you remember that movie, right? Crossing the Switchblade. If you never saw the movie, I know everybody, this guy's laughing. He's like, you're old. I am. Just like saying, but you probably get it. You look like you understand. Anyways, Crossing the Switchblade, this amazing story about the foundation of Teen Challenge. You got Nikki Cruz, gang leader of New York, right? Bad guy all the way, president of the Mau Mau's, most dangerous gang in Brooklyn. And then you've got this skinny country preacher, David Wilkerson, right? David Wilkerson, who's gone to be with Jesus now. But in the movie, it's great because it's like, Pat Boone and Nick Estrada, Eric Estrada, right? And so like it is as far apart as two worlds can be. And so David Wilkerson in the movie, he's got this experience kind of like me, right? I mean, I got this gun pointed at me. The first thing I thought was this scene from the movie where Pat Boone / David Wilkerson goes up to Eric Estrada / Nikki Cruz, gang leader, and says, wants to tell Nikki about Jesus loves you, Nikki. And Nikki Cruz, gang leader, pulls out a switchblade, right? And says, preacher, I could cut you into 1,000 pieces, right? And David Wilkerson, man, without missing a beat, at least in the movie, Pat Boone looks right back at Eric Estrada and says, Nikki, you could cut me into 1,000 pieces and every piece would say, I love you. Right? I know I shouldn't be laughing. That's the right answer. That's not what I said, right? That's not what I was thinking at all. Lisa points a gun at me, and my thought is, I'm like, don't shoot me, right? Like that's all I'm thinking. I'm like, this was a mistake, right? But before I could come up with a witty retort, before I could scream, before I could do anything, she points the gun to her head, and she says, I could shoot myself right now. It doesn't matter. And in a moment, she's told me everything I need to know about what she thinks about life, what she thinks about this world, I suppose what she thinks about God, if he even sees her. I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know that like Lisa's story was that, she's actually new to town too. Like she's a transplant. Mom raced her away from where they used to live. Because Lisa's the girl who was at the party. This happens. Like where when they ran out of drugs, it gets you high enough. When they ran out of sex, it gets you, lost enough. When they're just looking for some new adrenaline or thrill or whatever, like Russian roulette. Somebody brings up Russian roulette. Like that's a thing, apparently. Like it's not just for movies. And they pass the gun around at this party. And it's her boyfriend who gets the bullet, right? Puts his gun to his head. And it goes through him and into her leg is the legend. And he falls over on top of her and story goes that nobody really is sure how long she was trapped underneath his body. Everybody took off, right? I mean, that call to the cops wasn't made right away. And so, like, she's just never been the same since. I wonder why. She's got like a cynical perspective on life, right? She just told us. I wonder why. And Lisa messes me up for a long time because, like, I'd love to tell you that, like, I chased her down and went over those spiritual laws and talked to her about, shared the atlas of spiritual journeys so she'd find Jesus. Like, that's not what happened, right? Her friends came up and, were concerned she'd get in trouble. So they kind of hustled her away and, told me, oh, it's okay. She's had a hard time, right? And this whole thing. And, she fades away. She becomes just like this moment that I met Lisa for a second, right? I had so much to say to her and none of it got out. And I can't sleep at night. I mean, I'm 47 now. I was 17 then. Then we're talking 30 years later and I can still see her. I was taught a lot of things when I was trying to give God my life. When I figured out that I wanted to carry God's love to broken people, there's a whole bunch of trainings that I sat through. They would have been like this one if it was during the pandemic. We'd have done it over a computer. But as it was, that wasn't the case. But I sat in a bunch of trainings where they went over the steps of how you reach broken people. I was taught a lot of things. Maybe you have been too. I mean, there were scripts, right? Stuff we were supposed to say, right? You ever heard this question? Here's the big question I was taught. You're supposed to say, hey, man, if you died today, yeah, that's casual conversation for somebody you just met, right? Hey, how's it going? No worries. I'm a friendly person. By the way, if you were going to die today, and you met Jesus, I want to pause you right there. Because this is the script. I'm going to pause the script. Because the script is going to tell us what to give people an imagination of when they meet Jesus for the first time. Here's what we were told to have them consider, as if this would be the very first thing Jesus wants to know or have you know. If you met Jesus and he said to you, why should I let you into my heaven? What would you say to him? That's what I was taught to say to Lisa. I can already tell you, I would have gotten that far. Lisa wouldn't have listened. The last thing she wanted to do was answer a question from Jesus about why she was qualified. I know that's not the point of the script. You go on to explain how great God is, that we could never qualify, that he qualifies us. The problem is you got to get so deep into that conversation, people aren't listening anymore by the time you get there. That was my experience, right? Like it turns out that the first thing we do is present them with their greatest fear. And maybe there was a time when people would let you resolve that for them over the course of some sort of sidewalk lecture that I never found was the case reaching people. You don't get that kind of time. Like, it won't always be as dramatic as somebody pointing a gun at you and then pointing a gun at themselves and then walking away, but it's pretty quick. I've been told what to do when people walk away, or when you don't get through the sales pitch, or like when they don't give you the response that the sales pitch is supposed to elicit. It was explained to me that there will always be some no's, and that's okay. No is a response, right? I remember one pastor. I asked him. I said, "What do you do with the people that like aren't reached with these methods we're learning? The tracks won't do it. The cliches won't do it. What do you do? I mean, like, we're trying to reach people. What about when this doesn't work?" And he said, "Ted, some people, man, there's just no reaching some people. Like, no is a response. They've chosen. And in the end, it's not everyone. There'll always be a few." And this is the phrase he used. He said, "They're an acceptable loss." Well, that really jacked me up at night when I'm trying to sleep and all I can see is Lisa. Not the gun so much as the look on her face. because despite the words coming out of her mouth, everything across her face was reading like this: will you please tell me there's hope? Will you please promise me this isn't all there is? See, for me, maybe just for me, maybe for you, surely some of you know what I mean. You have an encounter like that, and writing them off as an acceptable loss won't work anymore, because Jesus lives inside you and me, doesn't he? And do you think it was a coincidence that I bumped into Lisa that night? It changed the course of my life. I guarantee you it wasn't a coincidence, based on the fruit it bore, at least in me, because there was something about coming to the end of myself and the end of the concerns about qualifications. I mean, like what do I have to say? Like, the one thing I know is this: you know what I do have? I have the word of my testimony. I have the knowledge that God loved me, cared for me, had a plan and a purpose for me. And he has a plan and a purpose for Lisa. And she needs to know that message must be delivered. And so this started a journey for me of trying to figure out how to reach the Lisas in my life and in the world around me. And so, I mean, yeah, I did all the stuff that at least they were training back then, right? I did all the scripts and the tracks. I made, I knew music was a powerful gift. You can tell what I'm warming up to. Music will reach people where somebody sings. I mean, yeah, okay. I hope you believe that. Most of your musicians or art, right? It doesn't just have to be music, but there's something about art. Like, I tried all those. I made mixtapes of Christian music and handed them out to these kids on the cruise. Yeah. I don't know if they really understood what the point of that was. I think some of them thought I was flirting. I mean, honestly, I remember one of the nights that had a profound impact on me and started to bring me to the end of all my little methods and strategies, because that's not what I'm here to teach you today, is methods and strategies. Like, no, God forbid. Like, I came to the conclusion those don't work, but I'll talk about this in a minute. But the way I got to the end of that is, I remember one night I'm out with some experts in the field of evangelism, at least for that area, and they've come to teach, to teach churches and people like us who don't know what we're doing, how to carry the gospel to broken people. And I thought, this is me. And I talked to them about Lisa and all her friends on the cruise. And they go, well, let's all go down there. And I thought, this is killer. We're going to take the spiritual SWAT team down where the need is, right? So we all hopped in cars and vans and church stuff, and we had our matching t-shirts on so we didn't get lost, and we went down on the street to reach the Lisas, and it didn't work, like, at all. Like, it was not, like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, they saw us coming a mile away, and we were walking and, no smaller than groups of 4. So, it was probably creepy. Think about it. You're on the cruise, you're waiting to meet people, 4 people in matching t-shirts come up. They've got a strange emotional glint in their eye. It's kind of off-putting. And, they start asking you all these weird questions that are inappropriate for people who don't know each other. And I remember watching this, person after person, encounter after encounter, it just failing. And not everybody was kind in the way they'd respond. So you know how that is. You've probably been in groups like that. And I just remember it finally hitting me that this was not something the Lord was trying to teach me, to do evangelism this way, as we watched one last group of partiers kind of walking away. And the leader of the group, the expert in the spiritual SWAT team, is shouting after them, I beseech you, please. And I was like, oh, they beseech you. I mean, like that doesn't mean anything to these people. I didn't know what else to do. I ran out of all the stuff that you're taught. I ran out of all the programs I could purchase. I ran out of all the ideas I could think of. But I still see Lisa in my heart and mind every night. I still see her friends. So, not knowing what else to do, I just showed up. So rather than going down there with something to say, I went down, the cruise was all centered around Denny's. Right? Remember Denny's? You guys still have Denny's where you are? We don't have them where I am, but Denny's, right? The little 24-hour diner thing. And if you've been to Denny's late at night, like, people like Lisa, that's where they go, like, late at night, like 2 or 3 in the morning, man. Like, when the bars have closed, everybody's at Denny's. And I didn't know what to do, but I knew that Lisa would be down there. And I thought, maybe the Lord will give me something to say. I just need to be present and on site and ready. And so I went and I'd sit there and I'd buy like a plate of nachos and hang out with these kids. And they, of course, by now they knew me as the dude with the tracks and the weird mixtapes. So they had a hard, they had fun giving me a hard time for a while. But somewhere in there was like this friendship that was kind of built. And the crazy thing is like I just listened for a long time. And somewhere in the process of that, trust was built. I learned about this thing called the ministry of presence. The ministry of presence. I realized that the thing people need isn't a sales pitch. What they need is love, because love demonstrated will lead to love realized. And love realized always leads to surrender. This was the thing that I was learning by listening and watching. The learning was producing understanding. The understanding was informing effective demonstration. Super Mike was the waiter on the graveyard shift at Denny's. Super Mike was, the life of the party. I don't know if he was hustling for tips or if he just was trying to have a good time in his second job. But he would do everything with the kind of flair you only normally see in movies, right? So like my plate of nachos wasn't just brought to the table and set down gently. It was carried, theatrically across the dining room and set on the table with a pirouette and a ta-da, right? Like it was that kind of guy, right? And everybody would cheer at the tables. We had like a party going on at Denny's is what I'm trying to say. And Super Mike was right there at the center of it. Now I knew Super Mike, was just a charismatic, fun, entertaining guy who knew I didn't have a lot of money back then. So, he was definitely like, sometimes the nachos were free. So that always makes friends, free food. And I knew him as just a pretty good guy long before I found out he was gay. By the time I found out he was gay, everybody wondered why I hadn't known, right off the bat. I just thought he was charismatic, the way I found out was really when people teased me for not knowing. And then when I did know, everybody wondered what the holy man's response was going to be, right? Matter of fact, the person who asked me first, and most obviously in front of a restaurant that grew silent when he asked what I thought of that, was Super Mike himself. So Super Mike one night says, "Ted, I just got to know. You're like a big Christian dude, right?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "What are you doing out here on the cruise? Why are you here all the time?" I'm like, is it okay if I'm here? You guys are fun." It's like, and he says, "Well, what is, so you're a Christian. This isn't really your scene." And I'm like, I don't know. You guys are my scene. And he's like, "Well, what does your God think of all this?" That was tough because I, again, wanted to know the right thing to say. I wanted to have the right thing to say. And I didn't have the right thing to say. I didn't know what to say. I said, "Is there anything that I can say that like you haven't heard?" And he's like, "No." I said, "Is there anything?" I said, "One thing I know is this. I know what he would say to you if he can only say one thing. He would tell you he loves you. He loves you. He has a plan and a purpose for you. And I only know that because that's what he told me. And I know if he loves me, he loves you." And Super Mike went, "Huh." Wandered off to help another table, came back and was normal. It was like we'd never had that conversation. And we would have many other conversations after that. Never again, really obviously going back to conversations about Jesus. And it tortured me because I kept feeling like I should somehow bring it back to that, so I could maybe, say all the things I needed to say, like explain to him that, he's, a sinner in the hands of an angry God, he, all the things, right? All the things, the gospel. I need to somehow say the gospel. And it just never was the right moment. And I did not, as it turned out, have the time I was hoping for, or the time that I needed to find that moment. Because he worked another job. See, he's struggling to get by, didn't make enough off tips, certainly not dealing with the guys on graveyard. And so his real job that paid the bills was working at the sugar factory. And I guess at the sugar factory, that's just not quite as celebratory an atmosphere as the one at Denny's. It's a lot of blue collar guys trying to keep their families fed, not getting paid very well. It's not, it's a starter job. And he's been there way too long. And everybody knows who he is. And this is in a rural area, like a hard scrabble area. And let's just say that like he represents a culture that is not the hallmark of the culture there. And that probably would just mean that he didn't have a lot of friends, but it would turn out to create a little bit of issue that he probably wasn't expecting, because somehow in the manufacturing of sugar, like a lot of factories, conveyors are involved, and somehow nobody really knows exactly how. One night while he's sweeping up the floor around those conveyors, his arm gets caught up in the conveyor, and that's obviously very dangerous. You can, it'll suck your arm in and you can lose your arm. But that's the least of Super Mike's problems at the time, because the problem is he's bleeding and he can't get untangled. And somehow in a factory filled with hundreds of people, everybody ended up being on break. That's just a lot of blood. And you know what gay blood will do, right? I mean, that was the thinking. Nobody's really quite sure. The bottom line is when they found him, he was gone. A lot more lost than his arm, right? And that also jacked me up. I got Lisa, I got Super Mike. And in the aftermath, it's in the news. It's a big deal because, there certainly should have been other people there. Nobody was there. And the saddest part is I realized it wasn't the first time he'd been left for dead. It was just the last. And as a Christian, that really bothered me, because I thought we were supposed to somehow tell him and reach him. And I was the guy on the clock. I was the guy on the ground. I was the guy who was there in his orbit. What did I say? I wondered. And, it was in the news. It was a controversy, and it's a small area that we lived in. And one of the things that was brought up in the news was that his friends wanted to hold a celebration of life, and the churches in town would not allow it, not at their facility, because of what he represented and who he was. And so at the end of the day, the only place to hold it was Denny's. And Denny's, this corporate entity, actually closed their restaurant in the middle of the day for Super Mike's friends to hold a celebration of Super Mike's life. And, it was in the paper. I knew it was going to happen. And I suppose, like a lot of people who knew him and knew that, there were protesters. This was back in the day when there was that kind of a thing. There were not like a lot of protesters, not like protesting like we know in 2020, that's for sure. But, some guys with signs talking about where homosexuals go and stuff like that. And, there is a church response by the church at large. And it's, let me put it this way, it's not really, there's going to be people, there's going to be press, there's going to be attention. And so, like, as a Christian who knew him and who knew his friends, I wondered, should I go? I'm going to be seen there. And I'm a youth pastor in this town of repute. Well, I went. I'm not going to draw it out. I went. I didn't see how I couldn't go. I didn't know what to say. I've got to, at least, I don't know. I got to go there. So I went, and I kind of hung in the back like you'd expect, right? And it was my first time ever being at a celebration of life that was not led by, that wasn't at a church or something, and didn't appear to have any religious tie-in. And so I'm just trying to kind of be quiet and watch, and I'm listening to people talk. And then all of a sudden I realize we're kind of in a circle. And then all of a sudden I realize everybody's grabbing hands. And so I want to stand out. I grab hands, and then I'm kind of waiting to see what's going to happen, because, like, I don't know what happens at a thing like this. Are we going to pray? Because this wasn't really religious. What's going to happen? And then I realize everybody's looking at me. And some friend of Super Mike's, who I didn't know, says, "Hey, Father Ted," I thought, I'm not Catholic. Yeah. He said, "Could you pray for us?" I don't know what you would have done. I just know that right there in that moment, all the concern about whether or not I should have been there, whether or not I'd said enough or done enough or whatever, I just knew in that moment the right decision. Like I knew that Jesus was there and I got to follow him and be there with him. And in that moment, in that place, and in that decision, absolutely, I will pray for us. And I prayed and I asked God to make himself real to every person that was there. And I prayed that we would come to know the love of Jesus for real, and that we would see him. And I went away from there with this stunning realization that somehow, without all of the verbalization of all the things I'd been taught, without going through the scripts and things I was told to say, somehow Mike got the message on some level, because his friends who I'd never met knew about our conversation, knew what I represented. They had come to experience the Jesus in me, I hope and pray, and therefore met Jesus. That was important for me because it told me that there was an importance in being there and being present. So like, you consider who you were, but if you're going to go forward and follow him like this to where he would take you, if you want to have an experience like that, where you all of a sudden discover that people don't see you, they see Jesus in you. And like, for me, I was like, this is all I want my life to be about. Like, it was so worth it, right? I mean, that was exactly what I wanted. And like, to get there, I was going to have to go. When I figured out that it's about being present where the need is, I was like, I have to go. So the second thing I would say to you is, if you're going to go, that sounds great, right? It appeals to the heroic. But if you're going to go, know this: to go, you're going to have to die. Jesus said, whoever follows me must deny himself. You're going to have to no longer live, but let him live through you. I mean, is that really such a big deal? I mean, like, when I heard that, like, it was easy for me when I decided, God, if you want my life that bad, you can have it. Like, that was so easy for me. Like, I had no plans for my life. Do you know what I'm saying? I had like no idea what I was going to do. Like, I was giving him, like, I thought, wow, God, you want my empty, meaningless, worthless life as far as I like, and you're going to give me purpose and hope. You would want to come live in me and through me. Yeah, knock yourself out, right? I mean, yeah, you know, but I don't know what it is for you. It shouldn't really be that big a deal if you consider what you once were, but maybe you've forgotten. Maybe you've forgotten, right? There's this thing, like, we get going and you know, I mean, for me, especially, like, as I've seen, I'm like, I could tell you these stories and start to feel kind of like some sort of dude, right? I got a million stories, guys. Look, it's already been almost an hour, and I'm like through like 10 minutes of notes. I'm so sorry. I will get through this as quick as I can. You know, like, you know, we'll I'm going to speed up, right? I could tell you so many stories, and it'd be easy telling those stories to think that, hey, there's a thing happening now. It makes sense. No wonder God saved me, right? I can start to feel like something because I forgot who I once was, right? See, like, and then I'm going to try to take over. God, thank you for living through me. I'll take it from here. I'm not going to do that. Like, you go, no, Ted, that's not me. That's cool. Die to myself. Absolutely. Let Christ live through me. Absolutely. I no longer live. You betcha. That's me, Ted. Okay, cool. You're artist. What about those artistic visions? What about those dreams you have, those creative ambitions? I mean, you're with ACT, so like, I suppose the cliche understanding of an ACT member would be that none of you are pursuing this for the strange, foolish, empty idea of you know, like stardom, right? You know, like, hey, we're gonna do this and people are gonna applaud, right? And like, we're gonna be big time and we bring something to the table. Hey, God, you know what would really help your brand? I really want to contribute to your kingdom. I would like to offer my gifts, skills, and abilities to you, Lord, to really just enhance your marketing, right? I mean, nobody here would think like that, right? And but maybe somebody who will watch this recording someday, maybe you're struggling with this. I just ask you, that platform you're trying to build, can you deliver love from the platform you dream of? Like if this is going to be about letting him live through you, like honestly, he does not care about building your name, your platform, your following, your fan base. Like he's got one thing he's bringing, and that's his kingdom and his love to people who are broken and need it. And if you're going to let him live and love through you, can you do that from your platform? Can I ask you this? Do you even really love the audience you make your art for? You think so? Close your eyes for a minute, right? Musicians especially, close your eyes for a minute. Dream of that place, that calling that you were made for, that thing that burns in you at night, that thing that made you sign up and register for this workshop or this gathering, right? This thing that you know you were made for. There's this moment you're reaching for. Imagine that moment. Imagine you in that moment. Imagine that place where you're going to finally be in the center of the vision you're reaching for. Imagine that. You got that picture? Musicians, what does the kid in the front row look like? Did you even see him? Like, was he even in the picture until I asked you? Look, I'm not dogging. Maybe he was, but I mean, like for most of us, like the center of our artistic vision and dream is often us. Like, I'd like to believe that I'm always dreaming about the mission God called me to. There is so much struggle in me to this day, and no doubt in some of us, some of you, some of all of us. Like, there's got to be a little bit of struggle, I think, if we're being honest. Like, because like usually the dream and the mission and the vision like shift to being more about dreaming of us being in that place, what we look like when we're doing it, forgetting the mission and the vision altogether. And that's got to go. That's got to go to the best of our ability. God, strip us of that selfish ambition and that flesh. We have to die. Like that takes a complete death, like to ourselves, right? So if you want to go, like if you signed up for this because you know that 2020 is an unusual time and you can't sleep at night because you're called to the Lisas and you're called to the broken people, like if you're really going to go, you're going to have to die and you're going to have to let Christ live and love through you and through your expression and through this supernatural thing that you call your art. Can you surrender like that? Can I surrender like that? That's a tough thing, man, because for a lot of artists, art is an idol, whether they say it or not. Like it is the center of their life, even when they claim it's a calling that they're following for Jesus. It is tough, man. It is so at the center of who you are if you're doing it from the heart, if you're doing it right. Can you imagine being that artist, so convinced that this is what you were made for? And when you go and check in with Jesus and you say, God, I want you to have complete control. You can live and love through me. And he says, sweet, follow me. And where he leads you isn't about your art at all. What if, after all the practice, all the planning, all the pain to get here, what if where God goes when you say, I'm following, isn't to the stage at all? What if it isn't including picking up your guitar or your paintbrush or your camera? If he's not Lord of our lives there, is he really Lord of our lives? Like Keith Green said it this way: if you can't not play your guitar for God, you will never be able to play your guitar for God. Can you surrender like that? We have to. In order for Jesus to live through us, we have to follow him where he goes and to who he takes us to. I don't know where you think you're going with this gift you have. I don't know. Let me ask you, have you thought about it? Have you asked God what he's given you to carry? What message specifically he's given you to proclaim and who he's told you to go to with it? Have you asked him that, or are you just going to the people you're comfortable with? The people in your dream when you close your eyes and imagine. The people you can imagine in your crowd. If you asked him who, like, I did not expect to be on the cruise. Like the one thing I didn't want to do with as broken as my life was give God any other reasons to leave me out of any plan or purpose for him. So I followed all the rules. I didn't have fellowship with workers of iniquity, is the way the youth pastor put it, right? I didn't date girls who cussed, or, well, I didn't date, right? Like, you know, I wasn't around kids like Lisa. I never expected to be in front of her gun. I didn't expect to hold hands with a gay dude or be seen at Super Mike's service. This was definitely not my scene, and I was definitely unqualified to be the one that God would take there. All I know is I followed Jesus, and it's where I ended up when Jesus walked that way. And when I encountered Lisa and I encountered Super Mike, it didn't take some sort of supernatural training or effort or conditioning to love them. I couldn't help it. Jesus lived inside me. He loves them, and I love them because he inside me loves them. It was a natural response. I found as I got to know them, Jesus helped me love them, and he gave me new vision. I saw them differently, and I learned to love them too, and that changed everything. It gave me new understanding, and that new understanding informed new vision. Have you really died to yourself? Have you given God complete authority, control over your artistic vision? The Lisas need to know, remember? How to tell her. The power of music in my life, I don't have time to go into. Music was the one thread of truth in the middle of all the lies that I heard Satan scream at me through my peers and my imaginations growing up. It was the music that pumped through the headphones, Christian music. It was all I was allowed to have or listen to. My mom was pretty sheltered, like she sheltered me, right? The best news ever was like there was something about the music that made me believe what the people were singing. I believed the artists. I believed the hype. When Petra said, "This means war," I understood them to be doing war on the things that were coming against listeners like me. I always thought musicians were warriors. I just figured they knew that. It never even occurred to me that they thought it was just entertainment. Those were hard truths about heroes that I'd have to learn later on. I thought that artists who were going on tour understood that they were on a divine mission, that they hopped in that van to seek and save that which was lost, not just to sell product. I always thought that artists that were producing music to go on the radio and being burned on plastic and vinyl to be distributed to the masses, I always thought of it as sort of like their message in a bottle, carrying the most important message the world would ever know. It never occurred to me it was just something to be bought and sold. I don't need to go into all those details. I'm assuming most of you know that there is a different way to approach art as a vocation. I'm not here to talk about your career. I'm here to talk about your calling. What if artists really went on a mission? I mean, deliberately, really went for it. What if those artists asked God who they were to make their expression for before they even made an expression? What if they went to the people? Like, have you asked God who you're supposed to go to? I asked you that before. Is this truly communication you're about, or is it just catharsis? It might be different than the audience you imagined. But what if you let him lead you where he would take you and the gift he's given you and the message he's placed inside you? Are you ready to lay down old dreams, maybe, to pick up the new life you're made for? We had to grapple with this with the tour that we have. The Extreme Tour is a bunch of artists who are really trying to go forward on mission, who see it as, really not about the music as much as it is about the message. And the music is a means to carry hope, life, and love to broken people. And we wanted to be a different kind of tour. We couldn't just go play shows and sell tickets and set up merch booths. Not that there's anything wrong with ticketed events or wrong with merch booths, but we needed to go to people who wouldn't buy a ticket and probably don't have money for merch. Most tours are about moving product. We can't be like that. We wanted to find a specific demographic. We were looking for the broken, the beat down, and the forgotten, the overlooked and the discarded, the abused and even the abusive, the lost, but more specifically, the hiding. These are not an acceptable loss to us. These were the ones that we felt called to go to. And we wanted to bring more than a show with our expression. We wanted to bring more even than just a declaration of the love of God. We wanted to bring a demonstration of the love of God. And this is where all those things I learned sitting at the table at Denny's without the words to say came into play. I had learned that love first has to be experienced so that it can be realized. So we asked God how to bring love to the loveless with our art. And he told us, go to them and demonstrate that they have dignity and worth by celebrating those who have been overlooked and ignored. So the events that we do as Extreme Tour, just to give you sort of an example of this effort to go, God, who would you take us to, and how do you want us to reach them? For us, it became celebrations of communities that normally are definitely not celebrated. Here in Nashville, that means that in the J.C. Napier neighborhood, we show up and set up a stage and throw a party. As we understand it, based on what community leaders have told us, one of the only times of the year that the little kids can come out outside and play, because normally you go outside and get right to your car because you don't want to get shot. And that's what they say. So I don't think it's hyperbole, right? And now we've been going for 7-8 years. So when we show up, they go, it's those people who aren't from here. It's the Christians. And so the little kids go running out with their hands up. Like I'm talking about, we show up to set up, they go running out with their hands up, with their arms up, and mom doesn't stop them. And because they've had a demonstration of the love of God, the love has been realized, and love realized leads to surrender. We learned to celebrate those who are normally overlooked, forgotten, or cast aside. And where we go is dictated by who God led us to. If we're going to look for the forgotten, we have to understand this will be a bit of search and rescue. I'm saying this because I have to believe some of you listening to this podcast, or this whatever you call this, it's new for me, webinar, I don't know, watching me right now, surely some of you feel called to these people too, right? So I'm just telling you, it's going to be search and rescue. People hurting and hiding don't often come out to be exposed. So you can't ask them to come to you. It won't work just to do it down at the local church, in my humble opinion. You're going to have to go to them. That's what we learned. We have to go to them. And the forgotten are often in the corners and the shadows, hiding in forgotten places. So this means, this is not a roadmap to market success, because you won't be going to major markets often, but unknown ones. It's not the big cities that look great on your tour schedule. It's places like Greenfield in the middle of nowhere in Missouri, population like 1,000, right? But like the whole town comes out now. Because love realized leads to surrender. Love invites and draws in. But it won't be the major markets. It's not the usual venues. It might not even be venues at all. What if, rather than a platform, God's calling you to the care homes, where those have been deposited until they expire? What if God's calling you to prison and juvenile detention centers, Skid Row? Right? This is the kinds of settings that we take tours to. Are you down to go to places like that, where you won't develop the kind of fan base that leads to market success? Are you sure? Artists? If you are, if you're going to follow, if you're going to endure, if you're going to sustain, if you're going to persevere, you're going to have to be ready to see success differently. I'm almost done. This is all about seeing as he sees, and your measure of success will be different. We had to consider this with our ministry. You can't judge this like a normal tour. It's not about numbers. It's not about attendances. It's not about merch sales. Certainly not about money. We learned you can't serve two masters. We heard that from Jesus. He said, you'll love one, you'll hate the other. In Jesus' words, not mine. You cannot serve both God and money. Money as a measure doesn't work for us. The broken often have no money, and if they do, like the rest of humanity, it's being spent on medication and security. Music and entertainment, charitable giving to programs, those are often luxuries that people in crisis can't afford. And when they do give you something, whether for a CD or a gift to keep you going, or, change in your gas can, I want you to consider that's a precious thing when someone that hurting spends what little they have to try just a little, to buy a little piece of what your expression echoes. Why do they do that, I wonder? Well, for more than entertainment. They understand, I hope that you do, that music can carry more than amusement. Music with the right purpose can carry medicine. Money cannot be your measure. You'll have to have a different measure of success. You'll have to have a different measure than the applause of an audience. This is going to cost you. This is going to cost you. I don't know what you think the tips and tricks to taking a demonstration and declaration of God's love to broken people is. So far, maybe it sounds like a bummer, but this is going to cost you. It's supposed to cost you. It's going to take your time, your talent, your expression. It's love. It's love, and love comes at a cost. So get ready for that. It's okay, though. It's okay. Because love calls us to selflessness. We don't measure success by what we get. We measure it by what we give. It'll cost you everything you have. It'll cost you surrender. But what will be given, I can tell you from living a life, 30 years of doing this, so many stories I want to tell you. I'm sorry I got caught up in some of these illustrations. I want to leave some time in case anybody has questions or discussions, but I can promise you this. God is faithful. You will never outgive him. He will provide everything you need. How are you supposed to live if money's not going to be your measure? That's usually what the young guys ask me. Like, how are you supposed to do this? I got bills to pay. I don't have a program I can give you. I don't have 5 steps or tricks. Maybe Byron does. I suppose ACT will help you handle the giving that comes in. They have a training to help you at least share the vision that God's giving you that you're going to chase, because people will support you as you go forward in that. Sure. Yeah. Okay. But I'm going to just tell you, for me and for most of my staff, like those people, those donors, God bless them. They might be a means God uses to provide for you, but they are not your provider. God is your provider. And he is faithful. And what Jesus said was, you seek first. He said, you can't serve both God and money. And he goes, look, I know you need food and clothing. You guys know the passage, right? He goes, like the birds are fed, aren't they? The grass is clothed, isn't it? The world runs after those things. I know you need them. But here's my instructions for how you live. Seek first the kingdom of God. Those things will be added. So I'm just one guy. I'm going to tell you, and you can ask me questions about it, and I'll stay on here as long as anybody wants to stay. And you can go if you have to go, but I'll be happy to answer your questions. Like, maybe you go, well, Ted, I mean, come on. I'm like, seriously, how are you supposed to live like that? You're looking at a guy, and there's another, at least one of us on the thread here, that like, we're doing this. We're not paid at all. Nobody's paying a salary. When we tell you that we're, that we got supporters, family and friends, I know for me, like, we're talking a few $100s a month. You can't live on that, can you? So you say, well, Ted, how do you live? Well, I have got a million stories. My car has a story of God's provision and somebody who gave it. Like, I'm sitting in a house that's provided through a story and testimony of God's provision. We're eating we have lived a life. You go, that's great, Ted. People say, man, that's wonderful, Ted, but I'm telling you that won't last. I mean, what are you going to do when you retire? What are you going to do like when the needs come in? I'm telling you, that scared me a lot more. I had a lot less words to use to answer that question, I don't know, 20 years ago. But like, I've spent the last 20 years living like that out of 30. So like, even the bivocational tent making thing, which people do, nothing wrong with that. I have done that in my life. But the last 20 years, it's been this. And God has met every need I have. He is faithful. He is your provider. You're following him. If you seek first the kingdom of God, those things will be added. This life is worth it. As a matter of fact, missing out on this life is the greatest tragedy. It's far worse than 2020. I promise you. like missing out on the life God has for you, far worse than 2020. Don't miss out on what God has for you. I dare you to go, and to go in faith, and to go boldly. And some of you go, well, that's great, but like, this is a wonderful pep talk, but how am I supposed to go back to my normal life and do this? It's just me. People are going to think I'm nuts. I'm going to tell you, you don't have to go back and be alone. You are a part of Artist Christian Testimony. Like, that is its own community and army of people ready to gather around you to begin with. But, they're only just the beginning. There is a world of people in the body of Christ who have been awakened to this calling and who are ready to go with you. They're ready to bring you with them. The name of this topic is opportunities to use your art. I'm telling you, there is opportunity. You're like, where is the world around me? There is opportunity everywhere. Let me give you a few I just know. You can write them down and look them up later. Josiah Venture, an exit tour in Europe. Friends of ours who do missions with musicians all over Europe, and I mean something like 50, 60 countries in Europe, right? They're all over the place. They're in schools, they're in city squares, they're working with churches, they've got long-term missions, they've got short-term missions. Some of them will pay you. Like that's the golden deal. They will pay you to come out with them. Look them up, Josiah Venture and Exit Tour in Europe. And I'll be happy to provide information for all these people I'm talking about. Echo Nation, our friends and strategic partners in the Caribbean, they have a movement, an army of artists all throughout the Caribbean. I forget how many countries are actually in the Caribbean. We all tend in America, we kind of think the Caribbean, and it's sort of like just one region, but there's something like 13, 14, 15 countries down there. And all through those countries, there is an army, a growing army of artists who are taking the gospel to their islands and from the islands to the world. And they have tours, they have educational opportunities, they have on-the-ground missions for me. I'm talking about for musicians. I'm talking about for painters. I'm talking about for artists who want to use their gifts and skills. They got places where you can go and learn how to do that, and they've got opportunity for you to apply that. So look them up. Echo Nation, that's EKCO Nation, out of Barbados, is sort of kind of coordinating all of that. But they represent a whole army of things down there. The Total Freedom Tour in Africa, happening now in 2021. It is just like Extreme Tour, strategic partner friends of ours over there, taking artists who are ready to give a few weeks and travel around Africa when we can do that again safely, right? And carry the love of God through music to communities, villages, inner cities, all of that, all throughout the continent of Africa. UCB, it's not just going on the road or performing live. Our friends with United Christian Broadcasters at MXTV, they're looking for artists constantly. MXTV has like a global footprint of, I forget what it is, like 3 or 4 billion people. It's like some insane global footprint. And they will take those videos that you've made, right, that you're just popping up on YouTube. They'll take those and they put them out on broadcast outlets, and both I forget what the word is, like real broadcast and online, all over the world. MXTV, they'll help you with that. Let them know you're with us. United Christian Broadcasters out of Europe, they have one of the largest radio networks in the world, and they are looking for music, and not just music, but they want to interview artists about their story to try to inspire people that God loves them. Like there is a world. I could go down the list. I've got this long list here. Look up Come and Live. Look up Steiger. Look up On the Go Music Missions. Look up the Luis Palau Next Generation Alliance. Like there is a world of people coming together to go, to follow Jesus, to ask him who he'd take us to, and to do it seeking first the kingdom and taking no thought for all the other things that we'd been taught was what we were supposed to be about, structures to build business, right? Like, but that's not what this is. This is not just about a career, it's about a calling. And there is a world of people who want you to come with them and want to go with you. So like Extreme Tour, yeah, I mean, I'm with Extreme Tour. Our whole thing is looking for us. How I met Byron. It's why we feel such a strong affinity for each other. We want to see artists to rise up as an army of love to carry the gospel to the world. And this is something that you could do with us. We go out 100 cities in the United States most years. This year, even in the middle of everything, we went safely and responsibly to 53 cities across the United States. And we have normally projects that we work with and artists that we take to 20 different countries around the world. Like if you want to go, there is not a lack of opportunity. And you don't have to do any of that to follow Jesus to the lost and the broken. You don't need us to get out there. You can go right where you are. You're already, like all of us, surrounded by the who that God might lead you to. Where are the broken and marginalized in your community? The homeless and the helpless, the skate park stoners, right? The kids that, intimidate the shoppers downtown, the downtown delinquents, the 2 a.m. bar crowd. Here's a biblical cue to help you see the people that God may lead you to: the hungry and the thirsty, the forgotten and the lonely, the sick and the imprisoned, the naked and the poor. Where are they, and what unusual venues can you find them in? Look up the city parks and plazas. Look up the youth clubs and the drop-in programs that are still open right now, some of them, and can't find mentors because nobody wants to touch anybody else. Look up the schools and music classes that are still in. Look up the hospitals, retirement homes, and care centers that have put up the plastic sheeting and are waiting for somebody to just come stand behind it to share the love of God with people who can't leave the place they've been imprisoned by sickness in, right? Look up the missions and the outreach centers. Look up the prisons and detention centers. Like, you might think it's hard to get in here. It's not. These people are waiting for your call. And the truth is, though, you don't have to go to any of these places. Everyone's fighting a battle and everyone's broken. The hurting and the broken that you can bring life to are all around you. They're in your audience at the shows you already play, in your workplace, in your neighborhood, at your church. It's not like we're all together. Right outside the doors. And if you have the heart, if you feel the call, you can go. You just have to be deliberate. You have to make a decision. God, if you want my life that bad, you can have it. So go in faith. Don't go alone. You don't have to go alone. Let people stand with you. That's what we'd like to do. That's what ACT would like to do. And I pray that God would help us to hear him and follow him obediently, most of all, right? He'll refine the art. He'll refine the pursuit. He'll show the way. God, lead us, I pray, in the name of Jesus, and help us to be obedient to you in Jesus' name. Amen. I know some of you might have to go. It has been more than the hour that I listed optimistically on my description of the course. Thank you for those of you who have been able to stick around. I don't know if anybody would like to ask any questions, or we do have Damon Curtis is with us. Damon is a part of the Extreme Tour staff, and you can go ahead and unmute your thingamajigger if you want, if you have something to say. Damon is an artist that joined our staff, came to the Objective, I think back in 2015, and met ACT there at the Objective, but has been a part of ACT for, I think, Damon, are you on with me since 2015, right?
I am on with you. I met ACT at the Objective in 2015 and became a ministry department last year, very early last year.
Oh, okay, yeah, and he's been with us for a couple of years now as well, and so we're thrilled to have him. I asked him to join us today, not just because he's part of ACT, and some of you probably saw him last night in what was shared, but also because he's an artist who went and did this thing. So it's one thing for me to get up here and rant as just some kid who musicians had a huge impact on. That's why I thought so highly of you. It's why I spent a life bringing musicians with me to love people. But I thought he had a perspective he could share from being an artist that actually went and did it. Is this worth it, Damon? Was it like what's it been like? Because you're living very boldly, right? You've come and joined a ministry where you don't get paid, and you're making it on miracles. Did I say that right? What's your experience been like? What would you say to people who are with us right now about what this experience has been like for you, and if they should consider it?
Well, to put it into perspective, I am coming from a place where I had a record deal on the table, and it just wasn't right. I knew it wasn't right. It took many years after that for me to figure it out, but there's something in me told me it wasn't right. When I was first contacted by the Extreme Tour in 2015, I was on the verge of giving up because the dream of stardom was not coming to fruition. And I went to the Objective, which is an annual gathering of put on by the Extreme Tour in Nashville. And I realized that my music had more than just entertainment value. I realized that God could use it for something special. And I knew at that point that that's what I was created for. That's what I was made for. Through several years of interaction and collaboration with folks from the Extreme Tour and other artists, I eventually had the opportunity to go out on the road for the first time in 2018. And when I went out on the road in 2018, I saw things and experienced things that I just didn't know were possible. And if I had any doubt up until then, it was at that point that I knew that this is what God had intended for me to do. And so I'm really condensing it, but to make a long story short, things started to fall into place, and I made a decision to walk away from corporate America and basically give up everything that I was comfortable with to answer this calling to follow God. And it's been a humbling experience and yet a joyful one, because he's provided for everything that we did. I've had the pleasure of seeing the people that Ted talk about, the Lisas and the Magic Mikes and so many more who are just broken. Even this last year on the road, when you would think with COVID and so many divisive issues in this country, folks were just starving for an opportunity to know that there is hope out there, and nobody else is delivering it. So we, the Christian creatives, not just the Extreme Tour, but all of us have that opportunity, and it was just something. It was just amazing to be able to be used by God to grow in a time where a lot of people just don't see that. So I'm kind of all over the place, but that's my perspective.
Man, thank you, Damon. What about the rest of you? Is there anybody that has any questions or thoughts? I know, Scott, you have a ministry. I didn't mean to be cyber stalking you, but I was looking up the list that they sent me of people who registered, and all I saw was your website, brother. But it sounds like what you do is very similar to the work we've felt called to. Can you tell us a little bit about the ministry that God's given you and the vision? The name is Creative something, right?
Yeah, so the ministry department is RIPE, RIPE Creatives.
That's right. Yeah.
So RIPE is kind of a larger brand for this community of people that we've been building for the last few years in Philly. So we have like a media production company, RIPE Creation. We have this pseudo label, RIPE Music. We have a worship team that travels under RIPE Worship. And then I launched RIPE Creatives to kind of basically allow myself to work with RIPE full time without getting a salary.
Yeah. Feel that.
Raising us.
Yeah. Whoop, he froze.
Years and was working primarily. Oh, sorry.
No,
working primarily with teenagers, college students in the city of Philadelphia. But I realized as that season with the other organization was coming to an end, that the consistent vein was arts. Like everything I did was arts. I realized that, out of 20 interns that I would recruit, 16 of them would be rappers, poets, dancers, singer-songwriters, just naturally, even though the internship had nothing to do with the arts. And just seeing that vein, I was like, man, if I could raise support to do arts and missions full time, that would be a dream. And I thought I was making that up. Gathering last about Extreme Tour first time, and
we're
so
losing.
Attracted to that conversation. Oh,
sorry. Yeah, we lost you. You were cutting in and out there for just a second, but you said you heard about Extreme Tour was the last thing I heard.
Okay. Yeah. So I heard about Extreme Tour, and yeah, like for me, it was so similar because I just gotten back from taking my guys that are rappers on a tour to colleges. And very similarly, it wasn't like this big established thing. We were in student unions or with Christian clubs or whatever. So whenever I heard about Extreme Tour, I was like, man, this is so similar. And with my conversations with Damon, to me, I'm like beyond ecstatic. I want to work with you guys. I want to like sign up, come on the tour this year, whether it's just me or me and others, like, because you guys build out the infrastructure and so much time and resource goes into like getting the sound equipment, renting the vans, getting the equipment from A to B. The idea, the concept of just showing up, being faithful with the gift and doing life on life ministry. I mean, my goodness, like that's the best thing I've ever heard, So I love the concept. I love the vision. I have a lot of hopes here in Philly to kind of continue to build our community. We're doing RIPE worship nights twice a month starting next month. We do secular showcases where we like incognito feature Christians in, but community stuff here in Philly. But yeah, that concept of like being able to go on the road with has the infrastructure behind it is beautiful. Like that's you know. So yeah, I wanted to be on this call because I knew Damon kind of told me about you, and I just want to work, man. I want to get after it. Like everything you're making this list of all these people to hit up. I'm like, I know what emails I'm sending out for the next 2 weeks now,
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm all about this, man. And I feel so like God has been so faithful. We are raising about $50,000-$60,000 a year currently. In year one to about 110, 100 annually. But even just to be at a place where like I'm free to be able to go on the scoop right now. Like I don't need resources from anybody to book me. I can actually go out of pocket and be able to put in, reimbursement requests for gas or mileage or plane tickets. Like God has been so faithful financially that I'm just ready to like say yes to whatever opportunities comes.
I love that, man. Well, I got to tell you,
I've been doing the open mic circuit for years, but I'm ready to, just walk through whatever open doors God gives us for sure.
that is awesome. Praise
Sorry,
God.
that was a lot. I'm excited. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. It was cutting out a little bit, so I apologize if I interrupted you. I started to. I was like, man, I just am excited to meet you, Scott, and it's exciting that you're getting a chance to introduce yourself to a few others here too. When I met Byron, it's kind of funny how you were going, man, I feel like we're doing the same thing. When I saw your website, that's what I thought, and that got me excited. Now, there was a time, I'm just going to be really honest with you, and I know this is recorded so other people will watch it. So let me be transparent for the sake of people who will come later, right? Because certainly not anybody in this group. But maybe you're going to be like me, those of you who come later, where I used to run into people who were doing things similar to what I was doing. And at first, it bugged me, because I was so used to having what I thought was like this unique revelation. But then what I learned to get excited. So by the time I met guys like Byron, who I met sitting at a Starbucks one day, I'd been hearing about this Byron Spradlin guy, about ACT. Everybody moved to Nashville. You're telling people about what you're doing. And because of the volume of cities we were going to, people knew about us, but they either thought we were crazy and not in a good way, or they would go, hey, you're onto something, but you really need to meet this guy, Byron Spradlin. And so Byron's down at Starbucks, and I'm at Starbucks, and we're at different tables, and he's wearing his little ACT shirt. And I thought he was maybe one of Byron's staff. So I went up to him and I said, hey, do you know Byron Spradlin? And he looked at me and he goes, I might. That's a true story. So I go, cool. He goes, who wants to know? And so I told him who I was, and he goes, oh, I've been told I need to meet you. I'm Byron Spradlin. And I'm like, oh. But here's the thing. By the time we met each other, I think we both had learned, at least I certainly had, and you probably didn't have to learn, but I had learned, like, hey, this is exciting, because it was always God's idea. Like, we are not the beginning of God's hand moving towards man through the arts. And we, should the Lord tarry, won't be the end of that story either. But we get to take our place, right, in this dramatic tapestry that God is weaving of his hand moving through his people to love lost and broken people. And, like that turns out to be biblical, right? Like we hear about the heroes of the faith, right? You're going through the faith chapter, all the Hall of Famers, right? And then it says, hey, some of these guys, they were reaching for a vision their whole lives, and they didn't get to see it come to pass. That sounds like failure. How are these heroes? It goes, but that was on purpose, is what the Bible tells us. It goes, that vision was only going to come to pass when their faith was joined with the others who were to come. That's crazy to think that we are walking in the footsteps of generations of people who dreamed someday that artists might come to. I have to believe dreamed. You look at the Salvation Army was founded by a guy who wanted to tell people God loved them, so he used the popular music of the bars of that day on street corners. And that was like in the 18 something or others, maybe even the 17. They're like hundreds of years ago, right? Like, so it turns out this ain't our idea. It's been around for a while. And the crazy awesome thing is when we meet each other like this, Scott, I've been so excited to meet you since I stumbled across your website and then connected it to the guy that Damon, I go, this is the guy Damon's telling me about, right? Because I'm just like going, hey, we're actually called probably to stand together. I don't think it's coincidence that we've bumped into each other with a similar calling. And the best news ever is like all those times when the devil tells you you're crazy, right? Like this is some idea you dreamed up. You go, nah, bro. No, I actually have met some other people on the team. It couldn't have been orchestrated by me. We'd never met before. And we have the same instructions. Like we're called to the same thing. So we're going to go do this. So I am excited to have you come out with us. And we'll definitely talk about that. I'm excited to see what we can do to support what God's doing through you in Philadelphia. And, right now Pennsylvania is in the news. So we think of you as a needy area that needs a lot of help. But, it's like, so we want to be down to come and stand together, man. I'm super excited to meet you for sure. Is there anybody else on here that wants to chime in? I want to make sure that we give up.
I did have a question.
Yes, sir.
My name is Dominic. I'm actually using my daughter's Zoom account, and she's Olivia, so that's what you're looking at there.
I thought that was weird, but yeah.
I've been with ACT since 2005, and I had been in Campus Crusade for Christ.
Yeah.
And my prior years was that in my youth, I was a professional rock musician and very serious. And we actually did attain to an album and so on London Records, got saved. Life happened. Had a wife and family, was a resort manager.
Wow.
And because I had gone to college, eventually had a seminary degree, MDiv, and felt called to, the reason I was put on this earth was to teach the Bible. Before I was a Christian, I would get these dreams of this random book opening in front of me, and I didn't know what it meant. And then I did, and then suddenly I was excited, and I wanted to tell people about it. There's a recurring dream. So I know the reason I'm on earth is to teach the Bible in a general sense. But since I had the music and so on, I left I was a resort manager. I left that to become a children and family itinerant musician, doing fun songs and stories on the behalf of churches who wanted to use me as a magnet for sort of kids events. And the parents would come and I would sort of preach to both of them at the same time. But then I felt the call to maybe be a pastor again. And so when I did that, the head of Keynote, which was a section of Crusade, said, well, you need to look into ACT, because if you want to be a part-time pastor, or something like that, but you still want to be creative, ACT will allow you to have a job, which is to say a paying, which Crusade does not. I don't know if you know about this or not. So anyway, all of that to say, I came on ACT ostensibly to develop a website that would have all of the doctrines of Christianity that could be viewed in 5-minute videos for children and for parents and children together to watch in different languages. And so I'm still maintaining that. That's called BiblePop.com. And it goes into India and so on, and that's a long story. But it's got 80 videos, 5-minute videos, where I do fun songs and stories and communicate that way. So that's a teaching ministry. Then in becoming a pastor, my heart was, well, how do you make because I had some small churches that I was doing. And what really kind of brought me to where I am now is that the church where I was in before this season, about 50 people, I got this idea. I said, what if we could attract, what if, here we are with a small church doing the attraction model and just getting Christians. What if we could do something behind enemy lines, to use the phrase?
Yeah.
It was also attraction, but it was creative, and the purpose would be to get those people to come and do life on life in our small church.
Yeah.
And so I got this idea of, I found a barn with some horses, and we did something called Cowboy Church. It's not the same as they do down south with the rodeos, but it's more of a horse church.
Yeah.
Because Southeast Michigan, there's this huge, horse interest. And so we, like even right now, we work with Victory Ranch, and there's kids that come from the inner city to go to the barn to see the horses and to hear a message. So what whereas that's you all are talking about what's more of an incarnational model, but what I'm talking about is how do we part of the burden on my heart is how do you equip churches, especially small churches, to go behind enemy lines with sort of an affinity attraction model that's creative and very, very ingenious, hopefully, so that people will come and you can maximize the persuasion of the message with horses. I mean, it's a miracle. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I could tell you story after story, but what we do is we go do that, and then we directly segue them into local church to hopefully be invited properly and have fellowship in a local church. The last church I did that in, the congregation was really with me, but the board asked me to resign. It's like, that's you, that's not us. We've been here 93 years. You want to go do that, go do it somewhere else. And it just really broke my heart, but it also put us in great crisis financially. So I have all that to say. I didn't mean to take up so much time, but all that to say, so what I'm doing right now is I did get a job as a chaplain in a retirement community. Doesn't pay a lot, but it is a full-time job. And Byron really prayed me through 2 years of just absolute, just being brokenhearted and rejection and not having money, and what are we going to do for money without ministry? It's one thing when you're believing God for money, because you're going into the streets and so on, that's heroic. But when you feel like you've been kicked out of no one's, because I was on the outs with my denomination, it was the missionary church, but it's like it was and I just thank God for Byron, because he just really helped me and so on. We maintained the Bible Pop website. I'm so happy about that. And I did get this job as a chaplain, and now I'm at another church that's far more supportive with the vision I described.
Yeah.
How do you envision a small church to go behind enemy lines with a very creative attraction model for the purpose of getting them back into church to take care of them?
Yes.
And so we're doing Cowboy Church. The website is cowboychurchonline.com if you ever want to go there. And one thing, if the Lord leads you to, is that there's this property down in, so I live in Milford, but I don't know if you know about Michigan, but towards the Ohio border, there's this property. It's rural, but in the whole Metro Detroit metroplex, that you can not only get the migrant communities, you can not only get the people that are rural and actually don't have much money, but you can also get some inner city kids, as I said, to come out just by doing really just find a barn and do a creative sort of get some of the kids that are taking horse lessons to do some vaulting or something and do music and then you do a horse demonstration and then do a Bible lesson that keys off of that.
Yeah.
Cowboy Don I work with, we call him Cowboy Don. He's actually a real South Dakota cowboy. He's with Miracle Ranch, which they board horses. And so an example would be, he'll get his horse and he'll throw a plastic tarp on and he'll call his horse and he'll go on the other side of the tarp and he'll call the horse and the horse won't come to him.
Oh, wow.
Walk across the tarp. And then he'll say, now, why do you think he won't walk across the tarp? So I'll tell you why, because that horse has never seen anything like that. He has no idea what that is, and he's not going to do it. He said, now watch this. And he goes over, gets on the horse, and he goes, come on, let's go. And the horse walks right across that tarp. Why? Because it's his horse, and he's riding the horse. And it's talk about a softball for preaching.
Yeah.
God, that we're not afraid and that sort of thing. Anyway, that's the sort of thing we do. And all that to say, there's this property down where we are where they already have an ongoing business of all these, especially young girls that take horse lessons with the horses that are boarded in a large riding arena. And my dream, and I already because I said, maybe we could get like a small business loan or something, and actually have that place, not only have the lessons, because my wife's a real horse person, where she could do real coaching, that's a whole other thing. But if you're into sports coaching, man, that is a huge ministry opportunity. Young people are looking for that mentorship. Talk about life on life, incredible. Yeah. Anyway, so she could not only do that, but we could have that riding arena as our quote unquote cowboy church, or maybe the primary cowboy church arena. And then the church that I'm actually now pastoring, which is another 50-person church, they're really on board with this. They love the idea.
That's awesome.
Hey, and again, Byron's all familiar with all this, and he's just been such a cheerleader. So yeah, I'm a musician, and I'm all, and I've done the creative thing and the going and doing churches and so on, and I've done the rock concerts too, and all that. And you're totally right about everything. And I think that the need for a vision for life on life was so inspiring. What you were talking about, I guess I come from it from a little bit different angle, having a pastor's heart of how do you envision a church congregation of people that are just trying to make a living, etc. How do you envision them to know that they can do life on life if they get creative about bringing in the fish? Yeah. And you just can't sit in a suburb and think people are going to come. They're not going to come. Yeah. You have to be behind enemy lines and get real creative, and I think doing a real creative attraction model that's going to maximize that persuasion. Yeah. And that awe, and then you can bring them in that way into the life on life of your own church. And so, all that to do. I mean, I felt like God gave me this vision. I'm not even a horse person. My wife, this came to me when my wife and I were looking. My wife's a horse person. When we were looking we have 4 daughters. The youngest wanted to take horseback riding lessons, and we were just going around the community, to try to find a barn for her. And I remember standing in the doorway of the barn, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I've got this creative idea. I think, because I'm seeing all these young people and so on, and they're just enamored with these horses. Incredible. And, they're beautiful animals and God's creation and all that. And I just got the idea that I described to you, and it seemed like the Lord was saying in that moment, yeah, I'll give you this idea, but it's going to cost you everything. I didn't know.
Tell me about it, right? Yeah.
And they fired me, and then that's what it cost me. So anything.
Yeah. Well, I want to really affirm what you're talking about, and I want to answer the question you asked, at least for a vision that God gave us. So we figured out pretty quick. We've been doing the Extreme Tour for about 30 years, and within a few years, we realized this is cool and everything, but if all we're doing is an event where we create a setting where people experience the love of God, it's a nice moment, but what about tomorrow? And just because we met them there where they were in the park, how in the world you get them in the church? Because it's a world away from them, right?
That's my heart. That's my broken heart.
Yeah. And so the Lord over the years gave us this idea for this thing. You heard me mention it earlier, called Stitches Cultural Project. So Stitches Cultural Project for us was sort of like a free coffee house / skate park / music venue. That was our horse barn, right? Because that's the culture that God called us to. It was an ongoing, permanent, regular outreach structure for, like you called it, life on life, demonstration of God's love, in order to help people awaken, like they like laying a foundation for them to experience what we're going to tell them about somewhere someday. And the way that we activated the church for that was to get them involved in the day-to-day operation. And so guys who only had, like a Wednesday night could come down, and they're just behind the coffee bar, and we would teach them to be relevant, like in your model, I imagine they could be there helping care for the horses, or, You know what I'm saying? Like there was places where they could serve, but they weren't like, so it looked like all they were there was to serve coffee, or all they were there was to sweep floors, or all they were there was to unlock doors. But that wasn't why they were there at all. They were there to love people and to build relationship and to let Jesus live in love through them. And as far as going to church and learning the foundational principles and being discipled became a very natural, organic thing that just happened because we were doing life together. So the idea of Stitches Cultural Project, after about 10 years of doing this in Salem for street kids, a little over 2,000 registered members, sort of like a Rocketown for like gutter punks, after having done that for so long, we realized these are philosophies and a model. It doesn't have to be a youth center. It doesn't have to be a music venue. It doesn't have to be a horse barn. It could be all those things. The principles are the same. And so you said it very well. You use some phrases that sound much more formal and official than the ones I ever came up with. A life on life model, and I forget what the other ones we use. But I was like very impressed. I was like, wow.
Yeah. We taught in Bible school. We would talk about the incarnational model versus the attraction model.
Yeah,
and that people tend to go back and forth from one extreme to the other, excluding the other when you need them both.
Yeah.
And so, I would say, well, the incarnational model of life on life is kind of like what you just said. At some point, they have to be discipled, to use that word, which different things, different people.
Sure. Yeah.
Fish, Jesus hung out with them, but it was a process of maturing them, and so you need both. And how do you, we've got all these churches of people that love Jesus, but they don't have any of this. They're sitting there and they're being wasted.
Well, they're dying on the vine, aren't they?
Yeah. How do we take this resource we already have and put them to work?
Right.
How do we put them to work with new people?
I think that the thing that I've learned to do is what you're doing. Is I think that what we do is we follow Jesus, and then we tell the story to everyone behind us as best we can about what we're seeing up ahead. That's why I'm doing this webinar with you right now. Is I'm like, I have been discharged, or I have been entrusted with a set of experiences that taught me something I need to share with my brothers and sisters behind me who think that the world is beyond reach, right? I mean, how many of us think that that we had to call them acceptable losses because we could not figure out, we figured they were unreachable. They're not unreachable. They aren't rejecting the gospel. They don't even know what the gospel is. They're not rejecting Jesus. They don't know who he is. They're going to have an encounter with his presence, his love through us but this is where the ministry of presence comes in. You have to be present. We've got to be there in the world, not of it, but in the world, right? And so I am all for, and I want to talk to you more. I know we've got some folks that are having to drop off, and I want to play a little video here in just a second, but I would like to talk to you more about this vision that God's given you. A, because I think we could support it with some of what we do with the tour, but B, so we go to churches all over the United States and all around the world. And what we've learned is that being obedient to our calling has an impact on everyone around us, not just the broken people we're talking to. So following my calling has had an impact on artists that came with me, even for just a week. Following my calling and us and the artists going out together has had an impact on the churches we visit for just a couple of days. Everybody wakes up different. I was changed by that encounter with Lisa and the gun. Our churches come with us for one day into a skate park or an alleyway or some really bad neighborhood, and their whole world is turned upside down. They see differently from then on. They can't sleep at night. And so they go, so what do we do now? And some of them are in areas where the model you have makes sense. They're going to be inspired by seeing what Cowboy Church is doing. And I want to carry that to them. And some of them maybe it's not Cowboy Church, but between what we're doing, because when I tell them about Stitches, they go, "Oh, Ted, I don't really work with street kids." But maybe if they see street kids and a horse barn, so those are two very different things, not necessarily, but it could be. Maybe they can go, "Hey, it's actually not the one thing; it's the idea and the inspiration to get out there and love people with the love of God through us." I love that vision. Well,
thank you, Ted. Thank you.
Yeah. Did anybody else? I see Nina. Did you want to chime in? I want to give you opportunity if you did, and if you don't, that's okay. I want to share a video real quick before we go. It was made for artists, and the idea is to talk to artists about what if. What if you step into this kind of a life? And it talks about this tour thing that we do. So there's a little bit of that too, but it's only 2 minutes long, and I don't see anybody raising their hand. So last call. Scott, I do want to point out too, Dominic, you might want to get to know Scott. Scott, forgive me because because I don't know your ministry really. I just saw what was on the website, but I think Scott does. It's not a horse barn, but same kind of thing. He's got like a music venue that they've established that brings people together and builds community. Am I saying that right, Scott? I'm going to assume I am.
Yeah. I think in the similar vein, I think one of the coolest things about what we've done is with creatives aspect of Ripe Creatives, like our showcase thing, we've been super intentional to not call it a Christian thing.
Yeah.
And
that's like what we do with our tour. Yeah.
Yeah. And so from that angle, like literally our audience is split right down the middle. Like there's 75 people in the audience that are like super, super solid believers, artists, creatives, fans of music. And then there's this other 50, 75 people that just walk in because it's, basically like the equivalent of a so far sound show where they don't know what they're going to get, but they're excited about, hearing new music or seeing different things. And then we do open mic slots. So we'll actually give power to people to share their voice. And a lot of times their voice, their content is not Christian, right? But we're like, if there's 9 artists in a night, we're kind of going every other one. We're going to slide one of our like Kingdom artist people in there. Yeah. And so whatever's coming out with the second artist might be some nonsense, but then we're going to redirect the narrative with the next person. And the only people that know what's happening are the people that are on our team, right?
Yeah.
But then venue and space is really important. So we lucked out, man. And it's, as I'm sure anybody would tell you, it's all favor, right?
Yeah.
But our venue is actually a church, but nobody knows that it is because they designed it as a cafe. Yeah. And so it looks like a coffee shop. It feels like a coffee shop, but there is a worshiping church there on Sunday. And they rent out their space as a venue, which would normally be about $600 a night for 4 hours. And they give it to us free of charge.
Wow.
And so from their perspective, they see it as a blessing for their church community because they get all their church people to run the concession stand and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And they're getting to rub shoulders with new believers or non-believers that they never would have met otherwise. Yeah. And so they actually have testimonies. I didn't even know this until a week ago. There's people that are now members of their church that came to our show. And we didn't even know that. They said, this is why we don't charge you. Because we have members of our church that only met us and only found out about us because you plopped your little event here.
That's awesome.
So I think place matters, what he's talking about, being able to establish something where the people who are there are seeing themselves as the evangelism team, even though they might just be there to unlock the door in their mind. You coach them and teach them and fostering them this outreach mentality and mindset. But yeah, I think always giving power away, giving people a place to voice who they are and what they're about. Like for us on the open mic side, it's just been fun, man. Cause we had a situation, where we got to really sow into a particular person who, while they're sharing what they're going through, they're breaking down, cause it's heavy stuff, and being able to stop the show and just speak into this person's life and love on them publicly in front of all these people as if they're in a church altar call type moment, but they're just at a concert, so being able to do things like that, I think has been, really different. You ruffle some feathers with the Christians, I'll tell you that, because they don't understand how they showed up to this Christian event in their eyes, and then this other stuff is happening, and you're like,
brother, I got stories, you and I.
So for us, man, but I would much rather be where Jesus was,
That's right.
Much rather be around the people that Jesus surrounded himself with. And if believers catch that vision, then when they're in that space, they're not coming as consumers, they're coming as givers, they're coming as evangelists. We could talk about this for days, but the church stinks at evangelism, man. Yeah. And so they aren't going out to the street corners and doing stuff all the time for the most part. So it's but if we can create third spaces where they actually interact with non-believers, maybe they'll step up to the plate and do the work of evangelism.
Come on.
So that's what our concerts have kind of been, is third space. It's on you to really follow through and do it. And yeah, it's been good. It's been good. So
It sounds like an awesome ministry, Scott. I'm glad I
guys,
talked to you
Man, yeah.
about it.
Well, I am looking forward to getting to know you guys better. I have your email addresses. I'm going to send out like some contact info, some web links, some things like that, so that we can
Okay.
keep in touch. I would really like Dominic to have a conversation maybe this week sometime. Same with
Sure.
you, Scott, if you guys are available, and just dream about how we might stand together. That's how we've learned we get stronger. So I
Okay.
will send that out tonight to you guys. And what I'd like to do real quick before we go, because I'm sure that they're going to shoot me. We are way over the time. I told them that's okay. They can always cut it up. Is I'm gonna leave you with just a little video about what's possible. If we go forward in the calling God has for us. Like, what might that look like?
Okay.
A little invitation about the touring. Some
And then I'll need to go right after that. So
Yep. Here it is. It's only 2
thank you
minutes.
so much. Great to see you, and I look forward to that email, Ted, and Scott and everybody. Thank you. And so, just saying goodbye right now. So.
All right. God bless you guys.
Yeah.
Let's see if I know how to do this. Okay, I think I'm going to push this button right here. And then I come over here and do this. How will you use the gift you've been given? As an artist, are you looking for a gig, or are you looking to make an impact? We're inviting you to consider a unique look at live performance and touring. What if your summer was a journey carrying hope, life, and future to people who are often overlooked and forgotten? What if, instead of asking them to come to us, we took this music, this message, and this event to them to let them know that they are seen, they are celebrated, and that they matter? And that there is hope, there is a future, and there is help to get them through these challenging times. What if we teamed up with people from their community who sit ready and waiting with skills, abilities, and resources to help those in need, but lack the ability to engage them in a way that reaches their heart? What if your music, your voice as an artist, could be part of the effort to bridge that gap so that people find unexpected hope and life in a time when everybody says it's all over? What if your gift, your voice, your ability could be used in that way? This is not so much a performance that will make you rich and famous. This is all about helping people. This is more of a charitable effort, something like Habitat for Humanity, except for instead of building homes, we're building community through music. Now more than ever, your voice matters. Now more than ever, your music matters. Now more than ever, your message matters. The message must be delivered, so we're going. What if you would consider being a part of an effort like this summer? All right. God bless you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time.